In a quiet village tucked between the rolling green hills of KwaZulu-Natal, where the mornings arrive with the cry of roosters and the smell of burning wood, lived a girl named Thandika. Her name meant the loved one. But sometimes, life has a strange way of giving you a name that feels like a promise you are still waiting for. Thandika was only 12 when she lost both her parents. The sickness came quickly, and poverty did the rest. One day she was a daughter wrapped in her mother's arms. The next, she was standing beside two fresh graves, her small fingers clutching the edge of her dress as the red soil covered everything she knew. After that, she moved in with her aunt, Ndlovukazi. The house was small, 2 rooms and a kitchen with cracked walls and a zinc roof that rattled loudly when the wind blew. When it rained, the roof did not just make noise. It leaked. And from the very first day, Thandika understood something without being told. She was not there to be loved. She was there to be useful. Before sunrise, while the village was still wrapped in mist, she would wake up. She swept the yard. She lit the fire. She boiled water. Then she walked down the gravel road with 2 heavy buckets to fetch water from the communal tap. The buckets were almost as wide as her thin legs. Her arms would tremble, but she refused to spill a drop. Inside the house, her cousin Ayanda slept under warm blankets. Ayanda had soft hands, polished nails, and dreams that did not involve scrubbing floors. When Ayanda woke up, she would sit on the bed scrolling through her phone, laughing at videos, while Thandika scrubbed dishes with cold water. "Move faster," Ndlovukazi would shout. "You eat here for free." Thandika never answered back. Because when you depend on someone for shelter, your voice becomes smaller. But even in her silence, something inside her refused to die. When she fetched water, she sometimes gave part of her bread to younger children. When neighbors needed help washing clothes, she offered without complaint. When insulted, she chose dignity over anger. She did not know it yet, but those small choices were shaping her future. One afternoon, when the sun hung heavy in the sky, a stranger arrived at the gate. He wore faded trousers and dusty boots. His hat was old, and his jacket had seen better days. He introduced himself as Sibusiso. "I am looking for a wife," he said calmly. Ndlovukazi's eyes changed immediately. She invited him inside. She called Ayanda to come sit properly and speak respectfully. Tea was poured into the good cups reserved for visitors. But Sibusiso's gaze wandered beyond the polite smiles and rehearsed laughter. He noticed the backyard. He noticed the girl kneeling by a plastic basin, scrubbing clothes under the sun. He noticed how she walked without complaining. "What is her name?" he asked. Ndlovukazi waved her hand dismissively. "That one. Thandika. My late sister's child. She is just helping around." But Sibusiso kept watching. He saw the way she stood up slowly to stretch her aching back. He saw how she wiped sweat from her forehead and continued walking. He saw strength. Within days, quiet conversations were held. And one evening, Ndlovukazi called Thandika into the kitchen. "You will live with him," she said flatly. "He has agreed to marry you." Thandika's heart pounded. I don't know him," she whispered. "You don't need to," Ndlovukazi replied. "He will provide. That is enough." And just like that, her future was decided. The taxi ride to the city felt longer than it was. Thandika pressed her forehead against the window as the green hills slowly disappeared. She did not cry loudly. She had learned how to cry quietly. Sibusiso sat beside her, calm and observant. When they reached the city, he did not take her to a beautiful home. He took her to a small apartment in an old building. The hallway smelled of damp walls. The paint inside the apartment was peeling. There was one old bed with a thin mattress. The kitchen was tiny. And when the clouds gathered that evening and rain began to fall, water dripped slowly from the ceiling into a metal bucket placed carefully in the corner. Drip, drip, Drip. Sibusiso watched her closely. He waited for disappointment. For regret. For anger. But Thandika simply looked around quietly. It will stop, she said softly. We can manage. She removed her scarf and tied it around her waist. She wiped the water from the floor. She adjusted the bucket. She cooked a simple meal and served it neatly, as if they were in a palace instead of a leaking room. That night, as rain hit the roof, Sibusiso lay awake. Not because of the storm, but because he was listening. There were no sighs of frustration. No whispered complaints. Only soft humming. The kind of humming that carries hope. Days turned into weeks. Sometimes the electricity went off. Sometimes there was barely enough food. Sometimes the bed creaked loudly when they shifted. But Thandika did not complain. When there was little food, she made it stretch. When water dripped, she moved the bucket. When darkness came, she lit candles. She built peace inside brokenness. And what she did not know was this. Sibusiso was not poor. He had once been. He had once slept in rooms worse than this. He had once known hunger so sharp it felt like betrayal. But through years of sacrifice and discipline, he had built businesses in Durban and Johannesburg. He owned properties, companies, investments. Yet when wealth came, something else followed. Pretenders. Women who saw his car before they saw his character. Smiles that disappeared when money was not mentioned. So he made a decision. He would return to humble places. He would dress simply. He would observe quietly. And he would choose differently. The small apartment with the leaking roof was never meant to be permanent. It was a mirror. And in that mirror, Thandika revealed her true heart. One evening, after weeks of quiet observation, Sibusiso told her to dress nicely. She hesitated. We are not going somewhere expensive, are we? She asked shyly. He smiled. They drove through streets she had never seen before. Past shining shops and tall buildings. Past security gates and landscaped gardens. Then the car stopped. Before them stood a large modern home, glowing under the golden sunset. The gates opened automatically. Thandika froze. This is not our place, she whispered. Sibusiso removed his old hat. Straightened his posture. And suddenly, the humble man she knew seemed taller. It is, he said gently. He explained everything. The businesses. The years of poverty. The disappointment. The reason for the test. I needed to see who you were when comfort was not guaranteed, he said softly. In that small apartment, you created warmth. You did not complain. You did not curse your fate. Tears filled her eyes. So I was a test, she asked. He shook his head. No. You were the answer. Then he did something that changed everything. He gave her a choice. You can leave if you want. I will take you anywhere. You owe me nothing. The world became quiet. All her life, decisions were made for her. Now the decision was hers. She thought about the leaking roof. The old bed. The cold nights. He had respected her when she believed he had nothing. That mattered more than the mansion. I will stay, she said softly. Because you saw me. Years passed. The girl who once carried heavy buckets returned to her village, not in anger, not in pride, but in purpose. She built classrooms with strong roofs. She funded school uniforms. She created opportunities for girls who reminded her of herself. When it rained in the village, children no longer moved their desks to avoid dripping water. Modlemini watched from a distance, regret heavy in her chest. But Thandika did not return for revenge. She returned to build. Because she understood something powerful. Pain can either harden your heart or strengthen your hands. And in the end, the girl they thought had nothing became the woman who gave everything. Her name was Thandika. And finally, she was truly the loved one. Sparkles.